back to another episode of Elephant Den. It's Ashley.
And Alex.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing a film that came out in 2000. It's a Japanese film, and it was directed by Fukasaku Kinji. What's the film?
Battle Royale.
In the near future, following a major recession, high unemployment rate, and an increasing crime rate among juveniles, the Japanese government allowed the passing of the Battle Royale Act. Choosing a class of delinquent students at random, 42 high school students, including Shuya and Noriko, are sent to an island and forced to participate in the Battle Royale game, where they have 3 days locked into explosive collars to fight to the death, and where only one survivor gets to make it out alive. So how did you discover this film, and what sparked your attention on watching this film?
I feel like this goes under the radar. Western audiences especially haven't heard of this film, but it's a highly acclaimed film of the director, but it is a Japanese film. Quentin Tarantino, he had a list and where he discussed his 20 favorite movies from the time when he started making films. He didn't rank the films, but he said if I had to pick a number one, it would be Battle Royale. And if there was any film that he wishes he directed, it would have been Battle Royale. Now, I'd be curious to ask him whether that meant if he thinks the film is perfect as it is, and he's just envious of that work of art, or if he just loves the concept so much to where he wishes he could have made it his own.
Yeah.
Because you do see the influence it's had on his, especially on his films immediately after.
It did have that same effect that it did with other films or shows that I've seen. For example, not only like Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill, but also Squid Game and Hunger Games. And I could just see a lot of things taken from that film, or at least the idea and the concept. And then evolving it into like Hunger Games and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Susan Collin pretty much had to have ripped it off, because I'm sure after it gained, it's a cult classic, so maybe wide audiences didn't know of it, but many people are familiar with this film, and it was controversial because of its violence when it came out, and so they would have definitely been thinking of making an American version. But that doesn't happen right away, and then before you know it, the Hunger Games novels come out, and it's pretty much the same
similar,
thing.
Yeah.
The only notable difference, I mean, there's multiple differences, but one that stuck out to me was how in Hunger Games it's kind of made the spectacle, right, which you would think is appropriate to our human culture of everything's viewed through television. In this film, Battle Royale hints at that in the beginning, where they show what you assume is a previous winner and the newscast or the news crew rushing towards her with cameras in the face and microphone.
And the winner being a female.
Otherwise, there's no cameras. It's not something that's, made for audiences to follow along in that world.
I could see Hunger Games being a more glamorized version of this. Mm-hmm. Just based on the fact that the people had training in advance, whereas like these students are just thrown into it without knowing what's really going on. Only watching an instruction video, which that in itself was really creepy.
Yeah.
Just
with her
energy, and her upbeat being like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite creepy, and even the teacher being so like, yeah, this is like. Let's go along with the video. This is the lesson.
But then he nails a student who's being disobedient. He makes examples of two students for being disobedient. One girl who's talking during the presentation, and he just headshots her with a knife. They randomly selected the students, or they specifically selected these students because they were a disobedient classroom. And one of the students actually stabbed the teacher. Mm-hmm. So he makes an example of him and kills him too. Which
I think this whole scene was really good, but those two killings make the whole situation so much more real.
Yeah, it throws you in there.
I think that's the good contrast it has with like how upbeat and like non-serious the video is, and then to him actually killing two students, which is like quite eerie. So just to recap, the teacher, his character, his name is Kitano, who is actually a famous Japanese comedian. My mom I've seen him in like the shows my mom watches when I come into her room and she's watching a Japanese show. He's a famous comedian. His name is Takeshi Kitano. And then we have Shuya, who is the main character in the film, the male protagonist, who we follow throughout the film. And then alongside them, there's Noriko, who is the female protagonist throughout the film as well.
And with Noriko, we find out later through flashback sequences in the epilogue that she was actually the only student who was kind
To the teacher.
To the teacher, and he grew affection towards her because he was estranged from his daughter, and she was the only one who would show up to his class. And after he got stabbed by the student, he just pretty much had enough, and he was ready to have all these kids kill each other.
Well, he retired, and then they asked him to be the leader of the Battle Royale Act.
And so that's when we're on the island, and these 40 students are sent out one by one, each with a bag that contains some rations, a map, and a randomly selected weapon.
I thought that was a very unique part in the film, just because you're working with 40 characters.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot to work with, and I love that this film allows for multiple
distinctions.
Like unique strategies,
Mm-hmm.
Unique to their own personality of how they would go about the Battle Royale Act. You're constantly feeling that. I mean, it's the same feelings I had when I watched Squid Game. It's that disbelief in the situation and
people's
like,
decisions.
even thinking to yourself, like, what would I do in that situation?
Yeah,
Like,
it's really
how messed up it is. Let's talk about how you've noticed some similarities to Lord of the Flies.
So Lord of the Flies, the novel, came out in the 50s, and there was the black and white film in the 60s, and they've made sequels since. The whole concept is the absence of adults and what would happen to children when
they're completely left alone.
They're completely left alone to their own decisions, and it's absolute chaos and savagery. The youth are completely disengaged and disrespecting the adults. What is their, rebuttal to that? And it's to put them through this situation on purpose, as opposed to Lord of the Flies, where it
was an accidental
situation.
From what I remember, I mean, there were multiple characters and different points of views, and that's why they were divided, right?
Right. In Lord of the Flies, you have Ralph, and he befriends Piggy, who's kind of the voice of reason, and they try and use the conch as a means of order. But then you have Jack's tribe, who they're the hunters, and they're the ones who end up murdering, and them taking advantage of the situation because they're there for an indefinite amount of time. They just think, we're on an island. Whereas here they have 3 days. And that's the tough point, is anyone, you would like to think that you wouldn't participate.
Yeah.
But you also don't want to just give up and die. These students are almost forced to make an even harder decision with time against them.
I think what's also terrifying is the fact that they are supervised by adults and controlled by them and forced by them to do an act that they haven't been taught to actually do, or they've been taught by adults that this is the wrong thing to do, is to kill one another. So I think that's just the crazy part about it. But it's interesting to compare it to Lord of the Flies, even though they are different situations.
Right.
But it is in the hands of children and what they would do.
Right.
Do you want to talk about the requiem at the end of the film and what that meant, and whether or not it was necessary in the film, and the last line?
We won't spoil who survives and how it concludes, but the film then has an epilogue where it shows some, what I thought were dreams at first, but they were really flashbacks to some of these students' experiences in school. Mm-hmm. They showed this moment at a basketball game where they won, and it was
the players.
It was this bittersweet thing of that moment being bliss, but then the outcome of most of these kids killing each other.
But do you think that moment of the basketball scene was to show the fact that these students once worked together and now they were forced to work against each other?
Yeah, that's
And
absolutely
it's just like that contrast
an
and
interesting.
a really sad
Yeah, that makes it all the more sad
feeling,
because
you know?
it's both are called a game essentially. And then after that, we're shown a much more intimate flashback of between Nariko and the teacher.
Kitano.
They're on a walk having ice cream after the stabbing incident, and she confesses to him that she picked up the knife that stabbed him. The way he answers her is so soft and genuine when he says, "And what should a teacher
What
say?
should an adult?
What should an adult say to a child about
Yeah.
that?" There's something profound about it.
There is. Yeah, it's almost as if, like, throughout the entire film, there's this barrier between adults and children. And then that was kind of like the honest answer that could connect a child and the adult, you know, and that relationship between the two. Because that wasn't shown throughout the film. It's a good question to ponder.
Yeah, it surprised me that it ended on that line in a good way. I really liked it.
If you've seen films like if you've seen the show Squid Game or films like Hunger Games, this concept won't be so new to you because you've seen those. But the fact that it did come before those films, it's exciting to see how it's influenced a lot of the cinema today. And it's just exciting to look at that and then ask yourself questions like, what would I do in that situation? Because it's so messed up. Even going through this situation, you see the development and the arc of the characters and how it's relatable. And I think that's what makes it such a good film, because it's got the great characters.
Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope you enjoyed our discussion on Battle Royale.
And if you haven't seen it, go right now and watch the film. It is amazing. Thank you so much for coming back to our channel. As always, we appreciate your views, likes, and comments. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, go ahead and click the subscribe button. We have an Instagram account where you could follow us for more updates and more information. Our account is called @Ashli and Alex.
We also have Letterboxd. It's a film lover's best app, essentially. You could organize your film watching experience, movies you have yet to watch. You could compare other people's lists, favorites, reviews, critiques, all that good stuff.
Yeah, our account is called @Ashli and Alex as well, so go check us out on there.
Thank you so much.
You're awesome.